why not sit back, relax, and take things easy like a Sunday morn? I'm your host, Shane Lockwood. Today is the 15th of November, and this is episode 85. Now, it's been a few months since my last podcast episode 84, and I do ask you to go back and listen to that one. That was about the ideal self. Today's episode will be about letting go of the ideal self. But before I get into that, I want to talk about why there's been a 3-month delay between episodes. The first reason was that Patreon had decided to charge GST, which is the goods and service tax that the Australian government has. And the Australian Tax Office is actually cracking down on various businesses, and they're trying to gain tax revenue from people who create content, whether it's through Patreon or through various other platforms. And I became concerned because my activities then get reported to the Australian government. The other issue I thought was, well, does this make me a tax collector then? At what point are my activities considered a business? Now, I think you need to be generating like a stupid amount of money before you even need to really worry about it. But then I had to worry about Centrelink, which you have to declare every cent. So it became like a deterrent. But I spoke to a few friends and they just encouraged me to do it anyway. The other thing was I encountered an app called TikTok. That's TikTok, and it's a video sharing platform where the videos are either 15 seconds long or basically up to a minute maximum, and it's a very short form of storytelling, and the stuff is very entertaining. It's just really insane how good it is, but then there's a downside to it as well, like everything. And I've started doing some stuff over there and just getting a lot more rapid feedback. But there's a community too, and an entirely different language forming. It's quite unusual, really. The other thing was that while I was on TikTok, while I still am on TikTok, I had a relationship, an online relationship that became really, really toxic, really, really fast. And I should have been aware of the red flags. But because I wanted somebody to give me attention, I think we often overlook a lot of the darker stuff. And so she was rather critical of my podcast and so on and so forth. So that became a deterrent, and then I've had other things on my plate. It's just gone on and on and on and on. But anyway, I'm now back in the saddle. Let's get on to the rest of the show. The ideal self is a fictional construct, and it's one that often comes from fictional sources. So it might be a combination. It's how we see ourselves, like the best ideal version of ourselves. And it could be, well, for me, an example would be the acrobatics of Luke Skywalker, Spider-Man, for example. The six-pack abs of Spider-Man, the speed of Bruce Lee, and there's other qualities that you can pull from media, various media sources, movies, TV, magazines, comic books, and so on and so forth, that represent your ideal self or who you would really, really like to be. And I wanted to say thank you to Rebecca for mentioning that she had like an Amazonian warrior princess kind of, I know I'm going to stuff that up, but that kind of mentality as an ideal self. And I think I want to say thank you to Adam Kochi, because he'd shared the podcast, but he'd also asked the question, do you have an ideal self? And he has mentioned in like a few of his podcasts that he's a fan of Jason Bourne and that series of movies. And I wonder whether that character embodies like an ideal version of himself. I know that he does he did an episode of his podcast, Podcaster Non Grata, where he had an ideal version of himself that he was taking the mickey out of, the successful but very, very, very obnoxiously arrogant podcaster. And quite frankly, I think it's one of his funniest episodes ever, and I think possibly one of the funniest podcasts I've actually listened to. Now, while having an ideal self is beneficial in that it gives us something to aspire to and aim towards in becoming better people, there is a darker side to having an ideal self, in that it's delusional and it can distract us from who we really are in the present moment. There's a difference between wishing you had a clean house and actually cleaning the house to make sure you had the clean house. There's a difference between watching an episode of The Flash and wishing you could run fast and putting on a pair of jogging shoes and going outside for a run and actually getting fitter and faster at running. There's a real danger of getting lost in fantasy worlds of the ideal self. There are also unfair comparisons between your ideal partner, the ideal self that you'd like to be married to or in a relationship with, and the actual person that's in front of you in the relationship. I was in, like I said earlier, a rather toxic relationship, but one of the red flags from the beginning was that she had set out what her ideal mate was like, and it was like one of those upwardly mobile, go-getter, highly motivated kind of people. And I was in the middle of a lockdown, and also I was struggling to cope with basically the post-traumatic stress disorder of everything that was going on around me. So you can imagine my whole life falling apart and collapsing, and someone comes along and holds up this template unfairly and says, well, you don't fit my template. And how much of this template matches your current partner? And it's an interesting thing. And does this template of this ideal partner get in the way of actually finding somebody to love? It's something to consider. Something that's just come to mind is the idea that a business looking for their next ideal employee will have a template like this. They'll have their ideal employee, will have all the qualifications, so on and so forth. And they'll use that to try and match their applicants. And sometimes they might get lucky, which is great, but I wonder how many brilliant employees they're actually screening out just because they don't meet one or two criteria. For example, they require someone to start really early. So they advertise that the person needs to have a driver's license and a car, but that might not be part of the job itself. So they might be excluding people that can do the job, but not have a driver's license. A few years ago, I worked for the state government on their fruit fly project, the goal of which was to eliminate the outbreak of fruit fly. And apparently it happens every year, and it's a different location each time. The people are smuggling in fruit when they shouldn't be, and so on and so forth. Anyway, back then I didn't need a driver's license because as long as I got there on time, it didn't matter. And there'd be other people that would be driving us around, and I'd be door knocking and letting people know what the situation was, and then spraying the bait for the fruit fly on people's trees and stuff like that. But this year, because of COVID, they only wanted people who had driver's licenses, even though I can still do the work, but they can only limit the number of people that they can put in their vehicles because of COVID restrictions and stuff like that. But there's no reason why they couldn't have hired me to agitate the genetically altered female fruit flies all day long. They genetically alter the DNA of the fruit flies so that they are infertile. So when they release them, the males come and mate, but don't produce offspring. It's a pretty cool idea, but they didn't. And to be fair, I'd rather find another form of work that'd be a bit more entertaining and thrilling, which is why I started doing comedy. With comedy, my ideal self is someone that's confident on stage, doesn't forget their lines, doesn't forget their joke or their dialogue, and that sort of thing. That's not the case, and I still got to practice working on my stage presence and just general confidence and things like that. That comes with time, and I've got to stop avoiding trying to get stage time and things like that. But that's my own internal struggle. Okay, it's currently the 17th of November. It's about 3:15 in the morning on a Tuesday morning, and this has been recorded over several days. But news just to hand is that there have been outbreaks of coronavirus again here in Adelaide, South Australia, and that has meant that we've gone back into a lockdown for about 2 weeks, but I'm hoping to have a whole lot more episodes out very, very shortly. I hope that everybody's staying safe and still social distancing and washing your hands and wearing a mask wherever you are in the world. It's not political, it's to do with your health and safety, and not just for you personally, but for those around you, those who are vulnerable. Children can get it, elderly can get it. It's just a bad situation all round. Please be safe and look after yourselves. Take today and the rest of today easy like a Sunday morn. While I'm here, I'll do the code word. The code word is north, 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 and let go of unrealistic expectations, otherwise known as your ideal self. Anyway, I'll see you next time.